I watched No Hard Feelings the other day. Um, it came out in theaters like in the middle of the summer, and recently just came out on digital. Uh, it's like the latest R-rated comedy to hit theaters, right? Um, Starring Jennifer Lawrence, some dude, Matthew Broderick is in it as the father character of the dude. But basically, it's like a sex comedy situation where Jennifer Lawrence needs money, so she gets this job dating this 19-year-old, and Jennifer's character is like 32, right? Which I think is about her age in real life. Yeah, but so basically, their parents of this guy want him to get a life, want him to get laid really, and start dating because he's all sheltered and shy and stuff. Um, and so the marketing of the movie is kind of like uh, about how like, oh, it's kind of sexy, right? But it's also kind of awkward. It probably leans in more to the it's a sexy comedy with sexy Jennifer Lawrence, than maybe it should. Really, it's not like advocating for uh such a dating situation of an 30-year-old dating a 19-year-old. Um, Spoilers alert, it doesn't, conclude with them falling in love or anything. It's an okay comedy, but I think it's also like similar to what the comedies we've seen in the past, just with a little bit of a modern taste. But what makes an R-rated comedy really? What makes an R-rated comedy? I guess. Okay, that's the wrong thing. Let's go to the right thing I want to do. I want to click on technical difficulties. Here we go. R-rated comedies. So what is an R-rated comedy? I mean, I guess they're geared toward adults, but from what I remember, because I used to, I think the heyday of the R-rated comedy was probably back in the 2000s, the 2010s, right? With like Hangover and Judd Apatow movies, like around when I was like in high school, like these movies were pretty popular even for high schoolers to go see. Um, and I don't know, they mostly were like dramedies, really, right? And they had adult humor, but sometimes they had some nudity in it, sometimes sexual situations, etc., etc. Um, but really, a lot of the comedy was kind of juvenile, right? But it didn't really start there. Like, really, it was the '80s. That was the heyday. Really, that was when the R-rated comedy really made it big, right? Um, I mean, you can go back to Blazing Saddles as probably the originator of. I mean, that was like the first well received satire for adults, right? About Rust Westerns. Um, but I don't know if it's on this list. This is just a random list. Uh, but there's like Animal House and Caddyshack. Those are older '80s movies. Even the Blues Brothers, probably like SNL's type of movies too. Those type of movies that came from the SNL cast of that time. The things that they were like pretty much focused on male fantasies or desires, really, like the comedy situation is always like the dude, the father figure here in Vacation, or the a male figure, whether it's Caddyshack or Animal House, the frat boys, whatever. It's always from their perspective. Porky's, often they were like the comedy came from them interacting or ogling at women and stuff like that. Often sexualized women in that sense, but that was very '80s, right? And then as we went further along, it's still a lot of focus on the dudes, but I think the comedy became a little bit more absurdist, wacky, but also kind of juvenile, right? When we got American Pie, that was the major point in the adult comedy scene, right? Again, about focus on the teenage boys, um, and the women were often there just to be ogled at, I guess. I mean, I don't really remember watching. I mean, I don't remember too much American Pie, aside from the pie scene, aside from the scene in which they spy on one of their classmates undressing or something. It's that type of movie, right? I think like with Judd Apatow, like it started to get a little bit more heart. It started to became a little bit less exploitative and became a little bit more accessible to people in general, besides just the teenage boy. Um, it I think the women were a lot more focused of it, like a Knocked Up, for example, or even Forgetting Sarah Marshall a bit, right? Um, where they were a large part of the narrative as the dude. But hey, what's up, Emma Johnson? How's it going? We're talking about R-rated comedies and just their trajectory. And so yeah, and I think really when Bridesmaids came out, that's when I think women started to be more the focus of these comedies, right? It's like, okay, now it's a woman's turn to be funny, to be vulgar, etc. Um, and then I think recently, like 2017, I think Girls Trip came out. That was also kind of like that, but there hasn't been too much of that. It was still mostly focused on the men, right? And but lately, people have been saying that the R-rated comedy is dying. There isn't really much of that. I mean, people in general, since the pandemic, really haven't been going to theaters at all as often, right? They only show up for the big blockbuster superhero movies, etc., or Barbie in this case, these days. But big franchise movies that are based on big things, whether it's toys or action figures or whatever. But as for comedies, do you want me to convert your PNG art to? Wow, that'd be cool. I don't really have a. I have a Discord account. Yeah, maybe you can whisper me or something. I don't know how that works exactly. But I don't know. I mean, I'm content with the PNG art right now. But maybe we can talk about that at some point. But that'd be cool. Or maybe I'll message you later or something. That'd be cool. Okay, so yeah, I just did this like in a night. I just like drew a little picture. But yeah, maybe you're a professional or something. I don't know, or you're more talented. Yeah, I'll just give you a whisper later or something. We can talk about that. But anyway, so yeah. But then recently, a comedy that came out that kind of made a little bit of a splash, but also kind of bombed at the box office, was this movie called Bros. And now this was also produced by Judd Apatow, but it had Billy Eichner as the main star and writer. And the thing about this one is that it's actually, I think, the first like mainstream romantic comedy that featured a gay couple, male gay couple, and that was pretty big. And overall, it was an okay movie, but I think it was also a little bit still too similar to the typical Judd Apatow movies. It wasn't like that, that revolutionary, really, besides the point that, oh, let's just have this nice romantic comedy, but instead it's have two men at the center instead of hetero couple, which was cool. But it wasn't also. I didn't think it was that funny really, and it did unfortunately bombed at the box office, not really grossing much, and I think that came out like last year, and I think people were still reluctant to go to the theaters. Okay, I'll look at the Twitter later. Yeah, so it didn't do so well, but I think part of it was because people weren't going to theaters last year as much as they are now. But also like probably wasn't really well marketed. I mean, this poster isn't like the best poster. Like maybe it's better to if you're a romantic comedy, you want to show the actual faces of the couple in the picture. This was, I think, mostly played for laughs. This I mean, it is a comedy, but I think people would probably saw this poster and just thought, okay, that's funny. Okay, move on. But maybe seeing the people's faces would have actually got them to be a little bit more interested in the substance of the movie. I don't know. I mean, there's could have been a lot of issues, or or different reasons why it didn't do so well. But that was really the last major R-rated comedy I can think of that came out recently. And then this year, No Hard Feelings came out, which I saw recently. And as I said before, it's it's kind of like a sex comedy, but with the idea of like Jennifer Lawrence dating the younger dude for money, basically. So it had like a little bit of it addressed like classism in a way that basically Jennifer Lawrence had to she's like an Uber driver and needs to pay off the taxes on her house and stuff, and like she's struggling. She doesn't have like a set like career in her sights or anything. She's just kind of like meandering, Ubering and bartending and stuff, versus this 19-year-old who has like a rich family and stuff. And unfortunately, the movie didn't really go too deep into the class dynamic really, and it kind of is revealed at the end that she, I think her father had some money or something, but they didn't really explore her relationship with her father at all. It was kind of like it wasn't really well developed, and but the thing about this movie is it did get some criticism. People, it's kind of like it kind of makes sense that like people would criticize it for the gender dynamics, the fact that it's an older woman dating a younger guy versus the opposite, that people were saying it wouldn't be made if it was an older man dating a younger girl, and that's true. The thing is that it's not really advocating for either or. It's more like a cautionary tale, really, in a type of way. Because it ends up like being that like Jennifer Lawrence's character isn't really the best character, and isn't really advocating for they don't really end up together. It's an awkward situation for the money, and although I think the movie kind of has its cake and eats it too a little bit, in the fact that like it's using the fact that it's like a sexy star in the role, and there's like moments of her being seductive and stuff, to attract like I think it probably attracts more young men to this movie than anybody else, kind of like to it's kind of like advertising this idea, oh, come to see this movie and kind of live this fantasy you have of like this older woman wanting to be with you when you're like 19 or whatever. But it tries to subvert things a little bit, by having a little bit more of a nuanced take, and Jennifer is charming and a good actress and everything. So she does a good job, and it's not like the movie doesn't really go out of its way to exploit her or anything. And there's actually an interesting scene, which I think that like is an indication of like where modern R-rated comedies are going, or what really audiences expect at this point. And it's the fact that like, or it's one scene where they go to the beach, and she's like, let's go skinny dipping, right? And so like in a 80s movie, maybe a 90s movie, or maybe even a 2000s movie, in the skinny dipping scene, you would see, it would be a bit exploitative, right? You would have the female lead, disrobe and go into the water, and you would get a view of her walking there. You would see her full frontal, or maybe just her butt or something at least. But in that scene, you don't do that. You don't really. The camera focuses on the male guy, on the dude, right? And like, yeah, he gets excited and everything, but it's not. It doesn't sexualize Jennifer in that scene, which is interesting because right afterwards, there's a comedic moment where their clothes get stolen, right? And so they have to go get their clothes. But the thing is that, so Jennifer, her character, actually gets out of the water and rushes these drunkards who took their clothes and beats them up, and she's all naked. And we do see her naked this time, but it's not in a sexualized manner. It's more of a comedic manner, similar to how in like a Judd Apatow movie, like Forgetting Sarah Marshall, for example, we see the male lead naked in a comedic manner, not in a sexualized manner. So I think we gotten to the point now where like, okay, let's make nudity comedic for women too, not just for men. So I think that was probably the most interesting part of the movie. She fights them, and she takes agency and control the scene while the dude is just in the water, like afraid and doesn't want to do anything, right? And then and it's funny. It's kind of funny scene, and then I think he gets on like they get in the car and they drive away, and then he has to hop on the hood of the car, and he's naked, so we do see a little bit of that. But again, it's like a comedic situation. And then later, the sex scene that does happen isn't really. It's like a quick like comedic scene. It's not like exploitive either. So so I think it's an example of how like you can have nudity in a film, in an R-rated comedy, without it being glaring, or like without it being like exploitative or ogling for the sake of young men to for them to watch and stuff for their sake. And I think it's important to note that I think Jennifer Lawrence was a producer in the film too, so that's also another reason why she probably agreed to do it this way, right? So yeah, but overall the movie was okay. It wasn't like, it still kind of ended in like an expected way, he goes to college, whatever, and then she continues with her life. It's not expected that they're gonna like stay in contact that much, which is realistic, of course. But I guess they could have done more with her character though, because we're not quite sure what she's gonna do afterwards. She said she's gonna go to California, which is kind of interesting because she had trouble paying taxes on her house, and now she's gonna go to California, which is, you would think, a more expensive state to live in. So I don't know, it's a bit flimsy there in that aspect. But it was an okay movie. But I think that like audiences, and maybe I'm talking about myself really, we're expecting in our comedies a little bit more sophistication, in our R-rated comedies. And one movie I think that kind of meets that standard a little bit came out last year, and it's more of a horror film, really. I mean, it's a slasher film, but it's also like a satire, so it's like a horror comedy. And that is Bodies, 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 which it's it's a typical slasher film in the sense of like it's these young 20 somethings in a house, and like it's like, oh, and then people get killed off, and it's like who done it, situation. And that's pretty fun, but it's also like pretty funny and kind of satirizing just just young rich entitled people and stuff in general. And there, people have criticized that it's a little bit like it's criticizing Gen Z in like a cliche way, it's not so insightful in that way. But I don't know, I thought it was still fun and good and fun. It wasn't like, I don't think it was that very mean spirited. I don't think it was really targeting Gen Z as much as it was privileged rich people in general, And I thought, the ending was pretty surprising in a way, and it was a funny moment. And I think like movies like this that have like a little bit more bite to them, a little bit more of a satire to them, just feel a lot more exciting, a lot more engaging than the typical movies, like Bros or like No Hard Feelings, that like kind of follow the typical ebbs and flows of a Hollywood picture, the typical like meet cute situations or whatever. It's like these people don't like each other, then they become friends, and then they learn something at the end, and blah blah blah. It's kind of like, just a little bit too cliche. Like we want to like, I think people want to be surprised more, and that's why I think maybe that's the reason why people aren't really going to see these movies in theaters, because it's like, oh, I already saw that. It's just a different spin on it this time, because I don't even think No Hard Feelings did that much. I don't think it made that much at the box office. So yeah, so maybe this is more the future, and also this is a slasher film, so horror films are always do well at the box office, it seems. So maybe that could be a direction these comedies can go in and still be successful. But there's still more R-rated comedies coming out. Like this other one I'm interested in watching, which has been getting some good reviews and also stars Rachel Sennett, by the way. Is a high school comedy, and so this one is like supposed to be interesting. I haven't seen it yet, of course. It's coming out like the 25th, so like a week from now. But let's read some of the reviews here. Unlike any high school comedy you've ever seen, it's a satire of victimization of violence and a satire of itself. So see, it's just another example of like, I think satirical comedies are becoming more, or I think that's what's capturing people's attention more, versus like the slapstick or the dramedies of yesteryear, really. Like, I don't know, I feel like I kind of grew out of like the absurdist like comedies of like Will Ferrell and stuff, like those years. Like, do people still like that stuff? I don't know. I mean, I haven't watched them in a while, but I feel like we've definitely shifted from that. It's now a lot more satirical, a lot more meta in a way, I think. It walks a tightrope between sensitivity and insanity. So I don't know, so this looks interesting. Another thing I wanted to mention is that these movies, Bottoms, Bodies, 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 they're directed by women. So I think that like another direction we're going is, hey, let's actually have some women, people of color, more diverse voices, in the writing room, in the directing chair, because I think that will bring out different types of comedy that we haven't seen yet, right? Because all these movies, even the ones I've like No Hard Feelings, even Bros, like it's all white men pretty much who are writing them, right? All these right here, like that's all they are really, with the exception of Bridesmaids, I guess. Oh, look, directed by Paul Feig. So, um, so yeah, like all these movies, it's like maybe we should get a different perspective. Maybe it's time for that, right? So I think that's where we're going, hopefully, and we'll see. We'll see. I don't know if I'll watch this when it comes out in theaters. I haven't been watching too many. I'm kind of one of those people who haven't been watching too many movies in theaters lately. I saw Barbie, of course, but that was really like the only movie I've gone to see in theaters since. Actually, I did see that Avatar movie, which I didn't really like. But I went because I was like, because supposedly, like, the Avatar movies are like the movies that are the movies you have to go see in the theaters for, right? Because they're like super IMAX and all the special effects and stuff. But I don't think I'll go watch the next one. But yeah, so those are just some thoughts on that. I was thinking maybe making like a video on this on YouTube about the comedies. You know, I have to research more about it. But also in general, like R-rated content in theaters, like what does that look like these days? Like, are we shifting? You know, are we being more inclusive? You know, it would seem so, right? And then also like are they more comfortable watching R-rated stuff at home versus in the theaters? Like there's a lot to delve in there, but that would be a topic for another day, really. There's a lot of ideas in my head I'm thinking about that I can make a video of, or videos of. But yeah, I'm kind of using this Twitch stream just to kind of like get out some of these ideas and then later refine them and then, distill them and then actually write a script and do a video that way. But yeah, so that's it for this topic, I guess. Let's take a little break, and then we're gonna